Welcome to a discussion of the issues of the candidates running for the Iowa House District 53 seat here on your hometown news station, AM 1300 KGLO, as well as online at KGLOnews.com. I'm KGLO News Director Bob Fisher, and we'll be talking with the candidates for this House District, which includes the Central 3rd, north to south of Saragordo County, including the communities of Mason City and Rockwell. And now let's meet the candidates running for this seat. Sharon Steckman is the incumbent running for a 7th term in the Iowa House and is a Democrat from Mason City. Born in Chicago, Sharon has lived in Mason City for the past 4 decades. Besides serving in the Democratic leadership in the Iowa House, Sharon sits on the Administration of Rules, Education, Environmental Protection, Natural Resources, and State Government Committees. In years past, she has also served as a ranking member on the Education Committee. Prior to her time in the legislature, Steckman spent 30 years in the classroom teaching 2nd, 4th, and 5th grades. Simon Abela is the Republican nominee for this election. Simon immigrated to the United States in 1986 and became a citizen in 2000. He was born in Malta and completed his education in the United States, having a Bachelor's of Science in Environmental Science and a Master's in Environmental Management and Health and Safety. He speaks 5 languages fluently and has worked for the Department of Defense and the United States military. Candidates, we welcome you to tonight's discussion of the issues. And for those listening to the radio version of this program, we are all socially distanced in our own spaces using Zoom instead of our typical in-studio face-to-face conversation. And this program was pre-recorded on Monday night, October 19th. Our conversation will work like this. I've compiled a list of questions for the candidates to discuss, in which I believe are of importance for our state government in the next 2 years. In an effort to have our candidates answer as many questions as possible, for the majority of our questions, each candidate will get 60 seconds to give a response to each question I ask, with each candidate as well getting 30 seconds for rebuttal time. If I feel we haven't had enough time to discuss the issue, we will continue in a back and forth discussion. And we'll rotate on which candidate will get the first response to each question as well. And at the conclusion of our program, each candidate will get 2 minutes to make a closing statement. Through the process of a drawing, Simon Abela will start with you and with the first question. And the COVID-19 pandemic has ruled our lives for the last 7 months. And Governor Reynolds and those who work under her have received a lot of criticism regarding the way state government has handled the pandemic. What, in your mind, should have been done differently to deal with the pandemic?
Well, thank you for the invitation, first of all. Personally, I think several things could have done better. Number one, if we have tackled this a little bit earlier than we anticipated back in January, February, when the breakout came in China, probably if we had about 4 weeks of that, we would have been in a better shape. Now, mind you, from what I understand, and again, I'm not into the medical field, but I can tell you this is what my thoughts of it. Number one, the masks involved. They work and work not. We have also to look into other factors where the virus can also go through through the eyes. So at this point, we don't know if it's by touching or just by airborne only. People are getting contaminated from this virus. Therefore, in my opinion, I do not believe that the government should restrict the use of mask or mandating the mask.
All right. Sharon Steckman, you're 1 minute on this question.
Thank you for the question. We've seen over 1,500 people now die of COVID in Iowa. And I really feel that we needed to be more aggressive about testing. And we had $26 million that was given to Test Iowa, and there was no oversight of how that was spent. I know some people that had testing had to wait a week or more for their results. So in my opinion, we need more PPE. We need, especially for the healthcare workers that are in the healthcare facilities, we need more PPE supplied to them and rapid testing. Frankly, it breaks my heart when I see folks that want to visit their mother, their father, their aunt, their uncle at a nursing home, and they can't do it. Why, if the president can get tested overnight, why can't we have rapid tests for people that want to go in and give a hug to their mom or dad? Those are things we need to do. Thank you.
All right. Simon, your 30-second response.
Well, it seems to me it's always the president's fault. We know back in H1N1 virus when it started out, very little has been done to it. But of course, that was kind of pushed and shoved under the carpet. As far as testing, I agree with you, Ms. Steckman, regarding testing. However, for whatever reason, we are not doing it enough. But however, I can tell you that on Sunday morning, on First Street, I saw cars lined up for people being tested for COVID-19 from Mercy. So testing is being done. Maybe it's not fast enough.
All right, Sharon, your 30-second response.
No, it isn't fast enough. And I wasn't actually blaming the president. I'm just saying if he can be tested several times and get the results immediately, why can't those people that want to go see their mom or dad and give them a big hug in the nursing home have that same ability offered to them?
Moving on to the next question, and what should Sharon Steckman, you'll start here first, and what should state government be doing in dealing with the coronavirus in the near future, leading through the winter months?
Well, I think when we go back in discussion, that needs to be a priority. We need to figure out how to get a handle on this. I want to see businesses going back to work. I mean, I want to see them being able to open their doors to folks. We can't do that with what the test results are right now. So we need to get a handle on it. The CDC has said that masks, if everyone wore a mask, it helps. Why not try that? So that, those issues, I think we need to follow what the CDC is recommending.
Simon Abela, your minute on that question.
I don't believe that the mask should be mandatory. Again, I insist that yes, the mask should be used, but I think we're extending this to more of a level. I'll give you an example. I was part of an incident command structure under the Air Force. I was a hazmat incident commander and also a trainer. And I tell you, when you're dealing with such viral or biochemicals, you have a full face respirator. So you're covering your nose, your respiration, your eyes, everything. Okay. I'm not asking that we go that far. Okay. But we also have to look at other situations where in Europe right now, they're coming with worse than what we are right now. If you think the United States is bad right now, there are other countries that are coming up with more issues than we are. Of course, they're a little bit different than we are. If the government can do something about it, I wish I have all the answers.
Sharon Steckman, 30-second response.
I just feel that if the CDC says masks could help, we need to do that. And a mask could mean covering your eyes. They have shields that you can wear. You can wear a mask and a shield, and you see that quite a bit. I don't know. I want to help my neighbor. I want to not know that I'm passing something on to someone else.
Simon Abela, your 30-second response.
I'm sorry to say that the face shield, I'm sorry to say, but the face shield will not do anything. Not even the mask that we have. Half of the masks we're getting, they're all made in China. I mean, come on, this is where the virus came from. This is why we need to go back to square one and manufacture everything we do in the United States, 100%.
That's my mask comes from the USA.
Okay. Let's talk, and Simon Abela, you'll have the first start on this. Ms. Steckman alluded to, some of what the governor has done. Of course, the legislature gave her some tremendous powers in the emergency time frame of dealing with state government before the legislature reconvened and making some decisions, including the Test Iowa program. Was the governor right in many of the decisions that she made in your mind during that time of the first part of the emergency, or did the legislature give her too much power in your mind?
Well, if the governor closed everything out, I'm sure nobody will be happy. So I think the fact that certain places were closed, the bars, and where everybody else is commingling and using the same air in the same room, yes. Could it have been better response? Probably yes, always. I don't think as a nation we are prepared for something like this. You know, this is not pointing fingers, but I don't think we were prepared for this. So half of the PPE we were getting, they were coming from China. And if you go to the stores, Ms. Steckman, I am sure you will find all these disposable blue respirators that they're made in USA and China. But again, going back to that, just the mask alone will not stop this virus. And there is one thing I want to say, there's a lot of fear among people that, oh, I cannot go out because I get this virus.
Ms. Steckman, your 1 minute.
Well, answering your question about the governor, I think no one wanted to be in her position. She had to make some tough decisions. I do agree with that. What I didn't agree with was the lack of transparency. I think we could have been more forthcoming with transparency about how was that 26 million spent. That's a lot of money to be spent on testing, and we had no, we couldn't track that money. I think that was very important. And I think the Iowans would have enjoyed it more or felt more secure if they had had more transparency from the governor as far as testing. You know, some of our slaughterhouses, we didn't find out how many had been tested and had the COVID until after we pushed to have that information. The papers pushed to have that information brought forward. So transparency is important. People appreciate honesty. Thank you.
All right. Simon Abela, your 30-second response.
I don't disagree with Ms. Steckman. I work for a food company, and I can tell you we were stringent when this came out. We're still stringent, and we're having all the precautions being met because we don't want people to get sick, period. Especially dealing with food and manufacturing of food products, right? So God forbid something like this would go out. You're going to have a double whammy. So we are extremely, I am responsible for that. I'm one of the team players that responsible for it. So I appreciate all that, but in reality, I think we can do something about it, but not just coming from the CDC. That's my opinion.
And Sharon Steckman, your 30-second or so response.
Well, I like to look at the science and listen to what the science says and what we should be doing. And so that's why I'm listening to them. All
right. Next question, and we'll continue with another pandemic-related question. And Ms. Steckman, you're to start here. And an advisory board that Governor Reynolds assembled in mid-June has made 56 recommendations for jumpstarting Iowa's economic recovery from the pandemic. The top recommendation is for the state to take steps to make childcare more affordable and accessible. What do you think the state can do to accomplish this?
Childcare is a huge, huge issue in Iowa. We have the cliff effect where, I knocked the door of a woman that she didn't take a job promotion because that extra $100 a month would have knocked her off the child care assistance program. So that's a cliff effect. We can definitely do something about that. You don't want to take a raise because then your child care, which might cost you almost $1,000 a month, will not be, you won't get any assistance for that. And then we have rural Iowa that has child care deserts where there's nothing there. So there are a lot of things we could do to help that. We can do grants to help centers open in rural areas that don't have anything. We can definitely help the child care assistance so that cliff isn't there. And a really great opportunity is for businesses. There are some businesses, like in Waterloo, there's a business that offers childcare right in their facility, which is awesome. So there are things we can definitely do. Thanks.
Simon Abela, your 1 minute.
Let me track a little bit about the COVID-19. When there was a word epidemic, okay, we quarantined the sick people. We're doing the opposite. Okay, so that's number one. As far as childcare, I don't disagree with Ms. Steckman. Actually, I agree with her. Where I disagree a little bit, why it's always the government has to do something. I do agree with the second part with private enterprise. And this is probably the difference between me and Ms. Steckman. I don't rely on the government to do something. So let's go out there and find incentives for small business to do that.
Ms. Steckman, your 30 seconds.
Sure, the incentives are great for businesses. In a perfect world, where you have a family that isn't living paycheck to paycheck, or even worse than that, the government doesn't need to step in. But there are families that need our assistance. And if we want them to be working and contributing to society, we need to help them out with childcare.
And Simon Abela, your 30-second response.
There were many times in the past that I needed to have my children minded. The government didn't step up. My wife and I, we took turns and we took care of our own children. Again, this is me speaking. I don't rely on the government to do something.
All right, we'll move on to the next question. And you're listening to a candidate forum involving the candidates for House District 53, Sharon Steckman and Simon Abela, here on your hometown news station, AM 1300 KGLO. And Mr. Abela, we'll move on to your start for this next question. Another recommendation from that advisory board dealt with access to broadband internet, especially in rural areas. What can the state government do to encourage the expansion of broadband access to the rural parts of Iowa?
I only can say we can introduce some kind of legislation to have more competition. I think that would be the very best step for rural areas, not just have one access to one company or two companies. I've lived in several areas. I'm not going to mention company needs a name, and not in Iowa, by the way. And there was one company and their service was very bad. You have to take that service. But if you have a competition, and you have two or three companies and you're paying for that service, then you're going to have another company that produces a better service, a higher speed than the first one, and so forth, so on. This is what I believe. Would I believe in subsidies? No, I would not. But I would make it less regulated from the state. Because to open a business nowadays, you need this stack of paper in order for you to open a business. And I know exactly what I'm talking about.
Sharon Steckman, your minute. Oh, sorry to interrupt. Sharon Steckman, your minute.
Okay, well, the broadband issue has become front and center because of COVID, because we have a lot of kids, even in Mason City, that have no access to broadband. They don't have internet in their home. We need to, and rural areas, for companies to go into a rural area, it's way more expensive for them. So I believe we need to have some incentives for them to go into the rural areas and be able to accommodate them in any way we can.
30-second response from Simon Abela.
Ms. Steckman, what kind of incentives are we talking about?
Ms. Steckman, if you want to answer that, go right ahead.
Okay, or we're having a back and forth.
We'll dispatch the 30-second rebuttal times, and we'll have a little back and forth
Well,
here.
it could be a tax credit. It possibly could be a tax credit, some sort of incentive that way for people to go, for companies to go into a rural area, because it costs them a lot more money to do that than it does going into a more populated area.
Simon, your response to that?
With the tax credit, are you going to suggest that you give protection to these companies that for this little town of 3,500 people, they are going to have a monopoly? Or are you going to open up for 2 or 3 other companies? Because usually that's what happens.
I don't know.
And I can tell you from my experience when I was in Alderman,
Go ahead. I don't believe you finished your. Repeat your question for Sharon. What you were saying again.
What I was going to say is, for these small towns, they usually would ask for some kind of a monopoly for that area, so they provide that kind of service. And my experience in the past have been, if one company serviced that area without no competition, they could care less what kind of service they provide.
Or the price. I do agree with that. I mean, we may need to make sure that that does not happen. I agree.
All right. Well, let's move on to another topic, and we will have It's Sharon Steckman. It's your turn to start here as we continue with the rotation on the questions. And when dealing with the budget, should the state look at what's happened in the last 7 months and be better prepared financially in dealing with something like a pandemic?
Definitely. We're not sure. I know the REC came out with a report a week ago, and for 2021, their projections were we were losing $18.9 million, will be coming in less than they projected. And then they're hoping 2020 will pick back up. So it's going to be interesting to see what the December REC numbers are and how that will affect our budget. I think we saw what happened when we cut state workers, say the Iowa Workforce Development, that group trying to deal with all the unemployment coming in. We had very few employees there. So we need to take a look at how we're budgeting our money for sure. And how much of the CARE Act is filling in, or we should have state dollars in those areas.
All right, Simon Abela, your minute on this topic.
Ms. Steckman, this is a very good point. According to my research, Iowans pay on a personal tax 8.53 versus New York 8.85, I believe. So without pointing to one or another, where all this money is going, we have high taxation comparing to other states on a personal level. I'm not talking other taxes. I'm talking personal. Okay. So my question is, I have 2 questions actually. One is personal tax. Where it's going? Where all this money going? Why we haven't lowered that? Okay, I know there's been some talk about reducing property taxes. That would be great. Number 2, perhaps you can shed some light, because some of my constituents ask me, where is all the money for the Iowa lottery going? Is that all going for education?
30-second response, Sharon Steckman.
So am I responding to your question, Bob, or to?
You can use your 30 seconds however you wish.
Okay, well, I don't have a budget in front of me to respond totally to what he said. I do know that compared to education budget, our tax credit budget has gone up 74%. And that's where a lot of our money is going, to tax credits that we have not looked at in years. They just go on infinitum. So that's something we definitely need to look at. And we've been pushing for that for several years now. So I guess that would be part of my answer. Yes.
All right. Simon Abela, your 30-second response.
Ms. Steckman, I know you're a great teacher. Everybody I talk to, you're a great teacher, and I have no doubt about that. You were a great teacher. But here's the thing. We're losing teachers in Iowa. I know 3 personal teachers that moved to Texas, okay? So I don't know where all this money going, for what. I'm not an educator. That's not my forte. But again, perhaps you can shed some light. Where's all this money? When, unfortunately, Iowa had the best education system in the whole United States. And we're dropping like crazy. Not to talk about the United States, which our education in the United States is worse than Russia, is worse than France, is worse than other European countries.
Thank you.
And I hate to say that, okay?
Okay.
I really do.
All right, let's move on to the next question. And since we brought up education spending, I'm just going to jump ahead on my list and talk about a couple of different levels of education spending. Let's start with K through 12 spending, and it's seemingly an ongoing issue with legislators at the State House. Simon Abela, it's your turn in the rotation to start here. Is it time for the legislature to look at the way school districts are funded and revamp the state school aid formula in your mind?
I have 2 children. One is 9 and one is 12. Sorry, 9. One is 9 and the other one is 13. And they're different, okay? My son suffers a little bit from dyslexia. We thought it was autism, but it's more dyslexia. And he is enrolled in the IEP program, okay? So I appreciate what the teachers do. But yes, to answer your question, if I would like to send my son to a different school and I'm paying taxes, I should have that right to do so. Whether it's a charter school, private school, or a public school.
Okay, Ms. Steckman, your minute on that question.
On educational funding?
On the way school districts are funded and revamp the state school aid formula. If you want to address anything that he brought up, of course, you can feel free to do so.
Right. There are definitely some things in the school aid formula that need revamping. It has gotten so complicated that a school board member, a new school board member, has to take classes to understand how schools are funded. It is extremely complicated. However, public K through 12 schools in the last 10 years have had the lowest funding ever in the history of K-12 funding. And that's the reason they're cutting programs. The class sizes are bigger. That we've lost 126 school districts. They've had to consolidate because they can't afford to keep up. And on the other hand, private and home schools have their funding in the last 10 years has gone up 53%. So, you know, I think we need to look at our 500,000 kids that are in public school and make sure we fund those schools and give them the resources that they need. Dyslexia is a huge issue that needs to be addressed.
30-second response, Simon Abela.
Well, I only been in our short time, but I'm trying to understand and read this Iowa 573, which is darn complicated. That's all I gotta say. It's very complicated, and I do believe that teachers are not being. When I say not being taken care of, I don't mean just, you know, from a union standpoint, but also from the state. We need to have the teachers more open to decide what curriculum to teach their children within that basic means, of course.
And Sharon Steckman, final 30 seconds.
Thank you. I totally agree. As a teacher, sometimes I felt my hands were tied because I was being told from up above what I had to do with those kids when I knew how best to teach those kids. So I really appreciate you saying that, Simon. Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the next question. And Sharon Steckman, it's your turn to start. Governor Reynolds, at the end of the elongated legislative session, signed a police reform bill into law. But she said at the time of that bill signing that this is not the end of our work, it's just the beginning. What more work needs to be done with what she was talking about, police reform bill?
Well, there were just a few points in that were addressed, and we needed to move on and do more. I really think policemen, as teachers, need help because they're expected to do more and more and more, and they don't have, say, mental health or drug addiction, alcoholism. They're dealing with issues, family conflict. They're dealing with issues that if they had a mental health person with them when they went on a call that could de-escalate the whole situation, that would be awesome. And so those are the things that we need to look at. The late Justice Katie, who I totally admired, said, some people need incarceration. Most people just need help. And we need to fund our justice system so we can continue with things like drug court, veterans court, health court, family court. Those are the programs that will help policemen do their jobs and the courts do their jobs.
All right. Simon Abela, your 1 minute.
I don't disagree with Ms. Steckman. Actually, I do agree, except for one thing. I will not defund the police or the first responders. The police, just like a soldier, need more training, more psychological training, yes, but they need to be sharp on the go, and we need to stop this rhetoric that the police is a bad person, because they're not. They're human beings like us. So if one apple is bad, doesn't mean the entire group is bad.
Sharon Steckman, 30-second response.
Totally agree. I think the defunding was a poor use of words. But I do feel that those that are not doing their job, just like teachers, just like profession, need to be held accountable because they're in a position of authority. And so if they're abusing that position, They need to be held accountable. There are tons of policemen in Mason City that I admire, and I'm glad they're doing their job. We need them.
Simon Abela, final 30 seconds.
I don't disagree at all. Like I said, I'm all for the police and all the veterans, and I appreciate all they do, and they put their lives on the danger. I cannot be my cousin was a police officer in New York. I can't do his job. Definitely not. So I appreciate all they.
Can I add something real quick?
And Simon would get an extra response, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, I had the opportunity to ride with a state trooper one day, and he pulled someone over, and that car had their windows tinted so you couldn't see inside. And while he's walking up to that car to give them a speeding ticket, I'm looking at his visor with a picture of his family. And I'm thinking, holy cow, that guy is putting his life out there, for us. So of course I appreciate what they do very much.
Simon, any final response before we move to the next question?
I had veterans that were still friends that were in the military, and they're police officers, not in Iowa, unfortunately, but in Missouri and Texas. And I admire what they do. I truly do. And they put their life on danger every day. Like Ms. Steckman says, if you open the door, you don't know what the guy has in the seat. So you have to make split decision. And unfortunately, and I hate to say this, but the media just condemn them right away. Oh, he killed that person, but we don't know the entire story. We make conclusions before the actual findings. So
we'll move on to the next question. And Simon, this is your question to start with. Governor Reynolds in August issued the executive order on felon voting rights after the end of the session. That's after advocating for the legislature to pass a constitutional amendment, saying that she believes that's the best solution because it then cannot be changed by a future governor. Do you think the legislature should address this issue again now that Reynolds has issued the executive order? Simon, your start.
My personal opinion is a yes. My personal opinion is a yes.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else to add on that topic? On whether?
Well, I believe everybody deserves a second chance. That's, if you make a mistake, everybody deserves a second chance.
Ms. Steckman?
So I have no objection.
Go ahead and finish. I did not mean to cut you off, Simon.
No, that's all right. I have no objection.
Okay. Sharon, your 1 minute.
I totally agree. Actually, Governor Vilsack granted felons the right to vote. And then when Governor Branstad came in office, he immediately switched that, which was a huge confusion for a lot of those folks that thought they could vote. So I applaud Governor Reynolds for allowing felons to vote. But I think we need to do it constitutionally also so that it's a done deal and people don't have to worry about, well, I can vote this time. Am I going to be able to vote next time? I think if someone served their time, voting is our constitutional right. And if they've served their time, they should be allowed to vote. So I think we need to, the Senate was holding it up last time. So hopefully we can talk them into it this time.
All righty. 30-second response if you want one, Simon Abela.
I don't disagree. The only person, in my opinion, that should not be able to vote is anybody that's in the United States that's illegal. But again, I believe that a person that committed a crime and he paid his time, then he should be allowed to vote, yes.
And Sharon, your final 30 seconds.
Well, if they're in the country illegally, they can't vote anyway. So that's a given.
All right, we'll move on to the next topic. As once again, you're listening to a discussion of the issues of the candidates for House District 53. Sharon Steckman and Simon Abela here on your hometown news station, AM 1300 KGLO, KGLOAM.com, and KGLOnews.com. I mentioned we were going to talk about education spending a little bit, and I hit one half of my question, but I didn't hit the other half. Let's go to the other half of that question now. We talked about K through 12 spending on schools and formula. The Regents universities are dealing with budgetary issues connected to the pandemic. And Sharon Steckman, your start this time. What needs to be done about funding for the Regents universities?
Thank you very much for that question. When we went back in session in June, one of the things that was done was cut the Regents by $8 million. And that came at a time when they're trying to deal with COVID. They're trying to figure out how they're going to have classes. They're going to do online, how this all is going to work. It's cost them a lot of money to start up school, and cutting them $8 million in 2021 was not a gift they wanted to see, I'm sure. Since 1981, Regents funding has reversed. It used to be the state was the main contributor to the funding for Regents, and tuition was the minor contributor, tuition and fees. This now, it's totally reversed. Tuition is what's funding the Regents, and the state is underneath with like 30%. Tuition is more like 70%. So that's putting the burden on families to get that paid for. And that's why our kids are coming out with so much debt.
All right, Simon Abela, your 1 minute.
I'm assuming we're talking about college and universities, correct?
Iowa State and the University of Northern Iowa, correct. The Regents universities.
To be honest and fair, I don't know enough about secondary education and upper education here in Iowa to make any comments on that respect. So.
All right. I think we'll just move on to the next question then, and have you've each given an equal response on that one. Simon Abela, we'll start with the next question then. Rural health care. Iowa rural hospitals took a hit from the pandemic. And does state government need to better address rural health care issues? And if so, in what ways?
I am sorry, but the broadband cut off. Can you please repeat the question again?
Absolutely. Rural health care is the topic. Iowa's rural hospitals took a hit from the pandemic. Does state government need to better address rural health care issues? And if so, in what ways?
Well, I mean, I hate to say the word government, but we're talking about the state government. Yes, where there is required help, I cannot say no to help. How are we going to help our rural hospitals? Are we going to give them money? Are we going to introduce some kind of stipends? I mean, I don't know. How are we going to make it better? I mean, I don't live in a rural area per se, but I work in a rural area. So you got a hospital every 40, 50 miles. That they are important. The most important critical point to me and to many is that little tiny hospital will not close. So would we allocate money for that? Absolutely.
Sharon Steckman, your minute response?
Oh, I agree. I think rural hospitals are extremely important. We have found with COVID that they're using telehealth more, and we need to allow insurance companies to cover that telehealth so that folks at home can access those rural hospitals, like if they have a counseling session or something to that effect, they can use telehealth. And I think the state of Iowa needs to do everything they can to support rural hospitals. It's right now with the privatization of Medicaid, we're losing our ambulance drivers. They're not being paid adequately for their services in rural Iowa. I had a New Hampton hospital person tell me that if someone calls them and it's an emergency and a heart attack and they're out in the country, she says, put them in the truck and get them to Waterloo because we can't get to you with an ambulance fast enough. That's how dire the need is for us to pay attention to rural hospitals.
Simon Abela, your 30-second response.
I don't disagree with Ms. Steckman. I think this is one of the things talking about medical that we, as the legislation go forward, they need to address this. And this is not about being a Republican Republican or Democrat issue. This needs to be tackled as soon as possible. Because we have a lot of people living in rural areas. Half of my staff lives in the rural areas. So this is really extremely important, whether your son is on a tractor, where your grandfather needs to go to the clinic, whatever it is, not just COVID only, but for other emergencies.
Sharon Steckman, your final 30 seconds.
I don't think I have anything to add to that. It is tremendously important. If your dad has a heart attack out on the farm, you want to make sure they get the best care possible, just like they would here in Mason City.
Sharon, we'll start with you again here. It's your turn. And dealing with healthcare, let's talk about mental health care. It also continues to be an issue, especially here in rural Iowa, with some centers in Iowa closing. What needs to be addressed with this lingering issue of mental health care?
Okay, some people say, show me your priorities, look at your budget, look at your checkbook. So we've had 2 mental health bills passed, one for adults and the last one was for children. I just got really upset and voted against the one for kids, and people can say, why did you do that? Because there was no money attached to it, or not enough money to make any difference at all. You have to back up your beliefs with commitment to resources for those folks. Our jails, we were talking about the policemen, our jails now are becoming our mental health hospitals. We're 49th in mental health beds in the country. So we need to address this and show it's a priority.
Simon Abela, your minute. You're on mute, Simon.
Oh, you're on mute. You need to, there.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
I'm
having internet connection, believe it.
It's the fun of a Zoom meeting, so we appreciate everybody always being patient with that. So go ahead. You've got your, I'll reset my clock here and you've got a full minute.
I do not disagree with Ms. Steckman, but I believe there are other programs that we can take money off and allocate to mental health. This is not just an Iowa issue, but also I've dealt with friends of mine with PTSD, and I tell you, it's something. I'd rather not talk too much about it because it brings memories to me, but it's something that we have to deal with, unfortunately. So again, we need to find some way to generate some kind of revenue. And if we have a facility that's 50 miles away versus 100 miles away, perhaps might be adjacent to the medical building, I don't know. We have to prioritize this.
Sharon, your 30-second response.
Well, I agree. And I think this is where telehealth has been extremely helpful. Those folks that need some counseling and need to talk to their counselor and maybe they don't have a car to get there or it's too far to drive, they can get, like we're doing, have a Zoom call with their counselor, and those things do help.
Simon, your final 30-second response.
I seem to agree more with Ms. Steckman than disagree. So,
all right. Well, we've taken an equal amount of turns here, and looking at the clock, we're sort of winding down, and I want to try to get as many topics to as many topics as here possible before we end our program. So we're just going to go with 60-second responses and rotate through. Everybody will get one response, but we'll continue our rotation. So 60-second response, Simon. We'll start with you. And in 2010, Iowans voted for a constitutional amendment to create the Outdoor Recreation and Natural Resources Trust Fund. But to this day, that fund sits empty because the legislature has not approved the 3/8 cent sales tax increase needed. Is it time for the legislature to do what the voters wanted them to do 10 years ago?
Why it's taking 10 years to do something?
Do I need to repeat?
I mean, really, why would, I don't know if I got cut off or anything from the internet, but why it's taking 10 years for something like this to take place?
I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm going to ask the question. Like I say, I know we're having a little bit of a broadband issue here, but once again, the 10 years ago, the state of Iowa, the Iowa voters voted to a constitutional amendment in creating the Outdoor Recreation and Natural Resources Trust Fund. But to this day, that fund sits empty because the legislature has not approved the 3/8 of a cent sales tax increase needed to trigger that fund to be funded. Is it time for the legislature to do what the voters wanted them to do 10 years ago and fund that 3/8 of a cent sales tax into that outdoor trust fund?
Yes, they should, in my opinion. But if you want to generate, generate revenue, the revenue should be, and I hate to use this terminology, more like a VAT, value-added tax system. If you want to get more money to the state versus just have a property tax and a personal tax, have a value-added tax for the person. The more you spend, the more you're taxable. Make sense?
Well, and I hate to interject here at this moment, but that's what this does with a 3/8 of a cent sales tax. If people spend more, even including people outside
3/8 of a cent is, yeah, yeah, sorry to interrupt, Robert. 3/8 of a cent is not much, of course, when you're looking at the population of Iowa. But if you fund that 3/8 and round it off to the nearest number, okay, and have a somewhat of a value-added tax instead of a sales tax, I guarantee you the Iowa state will generate more revenue for all the programs we need to do, where there's mental health, education, environment, whatnot.
Sharon, I'll give you a minute and change to, no puns intended, to talk about this one.
Well, it has been a point of contention. I have brought up several times that we should vote for it. It was on the ballot. Iowans voted for it overwhelmingly. They wanted it. And it was a percentage. It was all divvied up. I don't have that formula in front of me. A certain percent for paths, a certain percent for water quality. It was all divided up, and that's the way that 3/8 of a cent would be spent. Getting the legislature to vote on a sales tax increase is, I mean, the gas tax was a major accomplishment a few years back. So this has been, it's beyond me, because people want it. They want their water clean. They want they want some recreational trails. And you could add the extra, round it up to a penny, and use that money for mental health. I mean, to me, that's a great option.
Moving on to quickly, once again, I want to cover as many topics as we can here in the next 5 minutes or so. Minimum wage, is it time to explore increasing the state's minimum wage? And if so, what should it be and why? Sharon, it's your turn. 1 minute.
Our minimum wage right now is $7.25. No one can live on that. You could work 40 hours a week and you cannot live on that amount of money. You can't raise a family on it. You can't buy a home. And there were some counties that actually raised their own minimum wage to $10 or $15 an hour. And the majority party came back and said, no, 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 you can't do that. We're going to make sure no city or county can raise it above the state minimum wage of $7.25. I definitely support it. I have said this several times. When you raise someone's wages, all ships rise. I don't know who said that, but all ships rise. Everyone else's wages will go up. People spend that money in the community, and it all comes back for good things.
And quickly, just a one sentence answer. What should it be? What should the minimum wage be?
I think 15, between 10 and 15. I mean, I just need to see it raised.
All right. Simon Abela, your minute. And you're on mute again.
I have to disagree with $15 an hour. I do agree that $7.25 is very low, but 15 is way too much from a small business standpoint. Whether you want to put it 9, 10, I think yeah, why not? But there's other ways to generate income. And again, this is a further discussion, but to agree and disagree with Ms. Steckman, 15 is too much, 7 is too little. I don't know. 9, 10, $10 an hour would be good. I look at my employer. We don't pay anybody at minimum wage. So,
all right, we'll go to the next question here. The bottle bill always seems to come up every legislative session, and it seems to be thrown out by the time we get to the end of the session. Of course, have to come up every session since the law was passed about can and bottle redemption. So finally time for the legislature to not only address this issue, but pass a new bottle bill, and why or why not? Simon, your first start.
are we talking about recycling bottles?
Yeah, yes, the 5 and 10 cent can redemption.
Okay, so where's that money going to if it's collected? What we're going to do with that money? Is that going for any environmental program?
Well, the way the bottle bill works right now is you pay, like if you pay for 5 cents for a can, you get that 5 cents back when you redeem it. I believe I believe a 1 cent of that, I believe, goes back to the grocer. Ms. Steckman, help me on this. If am I right on that?
Right. Well, it's basically to encourage people to bring their bottles back so they can be recycled instead of thrown out in the ditches and, just tossed away. And it's an environmental program.
Who is administrating this environment? Excuse me. This is my forte here on the environmental issue, Ms. Steckman. Here's the deal. I'm not against it, but who is really gaining on that? Is the grocer or the IDNR? Okay. Are we taking that money and we actually doing something with that money for the environment, whether it's water conservation, whether it's wetlands, whatever it is? Okay. That is my intake on it, because there's so many incentives and recycling incentives. They start really high, and then by the time you end up finishing the project, you will be upside down.
And not to infuse myself on the
I'm
conversation,
not
but
against it, I'm just saying.
Right. To infuse myself on the conversation, you're just getting quickly. The grocers don't want it, so we know that because the grocers lobbying group has been adamant since the start of the bottle bill that they don't want it. Ms. Steckman, I'll give you your minute response on this, and then we'll move along.
Right. Well, it's basically a recycling to ensure a cleaner environment. So you're encouraging people to bring those bottles back so that they're not just dumping them in the streams, in the ditches. And we had a bipartisan bottle bill all ready to go last session, and it was didn't go anywhere. It was not accepted by leadership, so it ended up not, and mainly because the grocer lobbyists were fighting it. So I'm hopefully we can get something together this session.
All right, a couple of quick answers before we go to closing statements. Just looking at the rotation, Ms. Steckman, you're up on this one. But quick 30 seconds or so answer. Do you support raising the state's tobacco tax by $1 to $2.36 a pack at all?
Oh, I hadn't even thought about that. I really hadn't. I hadn't given that much thought. I'm kind of focused in on the I will, the trust fund for the water, and
right.
So that's where I am right now.
All right, Mr. Abela, any thoughts on raising the state's tobacco tax by $1 a pack?
I don't smoke, so I don't know how much it is. I quit a long time ago. But let me go back on the bottle issue.
Okay.
I think on the recycling factor, one of the biggest nuisance is not the bottles. It's these plastic bags that they're polluting the streets and the roads and the valleys. That's what we should do something about more than the bottles.
All right, and one final question before we get to closing statements. Let's just talk about, and I may give you a little bit more than a minute on this one just to respond, because this is a kind of a bigger question. Civility in politics. Reporters used to comment a couple of decades ago how Washington-style, non-civility style of politics had not worked its way down to the state house level. But many of these same reporters today agree with me that it's no longer the case, that we see a lot of that has filtered down to the State House. Can you tell me how you would better promote civility in politics in general if you were elected to serve the next 2 years in the legislature? Simon, we'll start with you.
I'm sorry, Bob. You cut off the first part of the question again.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
no,
Go
you're
ahead.
fine. You're fine. And I'll just restate the question in whole. We're talking about civility in politics, and reporters like me used to comment a couple of decades ago how Washington-style, non-civility style of politics had not worked its way down to the State House level in Des Moines. But many of those same reporters today agree that that's no longer the case, that there's non-civility in our politics at the State House. Can you tell me how you would better promote civility in politics if you were elected to serve the next 2 years in the legislature?
Well, I do believe in free speech, 100%, but I also believe in accountability. So civility starts from the reporter. If the reporter is just promoting himself or his story without having the truth behind it, then there should be, in my opinion, there should be some repercussions, even though I believe in free speech.
Ms. Steckman?
Well, I think, were you talking about civility among legislators with each other?
Like I say, about 2 decades ago, we would always used to say that the Washington style of politics were not done happening in Des Moines. We believe that has definitely changed over that last 2-decade period. And what would you do to help try to promote more civility in politics and maybe bipartisanship as well?
Well, I really think you need to listen to what someone else has to say and try and create a dialogue with that person instead of immediately coming back with an argument. And as a teacher, you just learn to be a good listener. And I think you have to work with people. And I have seen a decline since I've been in the legislature of wanting to work together. I mean, I can have an amendment on a bill and I can have a bill and it won't even get looked at. And I think there's good ideas, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or a broadcaster. Everybody has good ideas. And so we need to listen to those good ideas and then make our decision, not look at who's saying it and decide right away we don't like it when we haven't even heard it.
All right, well, candidates, we are nearing the end of our broadcast time, and now is the time to make your closing statements for the evening. Each candidate will receive 2 minutes to make their final pitch on why you should vote for them. And candidates will continue with the rotation that we were in, and the first opportunity goes to Sharon Steckman.
Well, thank you very much. I'm excited to be here. I forgot to mention that the Climate Cabinet, which is a national organization, picked 40 people in the nation to say they are environmentally conscious people. And I wish we'd talk more about the environment, because next to education, that's close to my heart right now for Iowa with our waterways. And I want to keep working on that. I think it's important. We've had the trifecta, they call it, with for 4 years, we've had total Republican control and no compromise. And I really feel it's important to get that compromise in there. The first bill that was passed when Republicans had total control was the House File 291, which gutted collective bargaining, and 180,000 people lost their right to bargain. So I really feel it's important for me to get back in there. And as we talked about just a minute ago, work on compromise. That is so important. And I don't think we need another 2 years of total control by one party. I want to quote Jeb Bush. He said, "The thing about a divided government is that you can't say my way or the highway." So, that's why one of the reasons I'm running, to make sure we have compromise in state government and all Iowan voices are heard. So thank you for having this, Bob. Great.
Sharon Steckman, thank you once again. And final comments from Simon Abela.
Thanks for inviting me, Bob. Regarding the environment, I can tell you right now, I work for oil and gas companies. and they do an excellent job. I do believe in climate change. No, it's a man-made climate change. So we have a great ethanol business in Iowa, which I applaud. I'm not against other industries like wind and solar. Absolutely not. You can't put all the eggs in one basket. I think our environment compared to other states is not so bad. I do not believe in regulating more businesses. We got enough regulation as they are. I have no problem reaching out to other ideas, but I'm sorry to say I don't believe in the Green New Deal. Okay. I think the state needs to look into other ways to bring taxation. And again, an example would be a value-added tax. If Simon wants to buy a Ferrari, he should pay 15% on a Ferrari. If you can afford a Kia, then you pay the 15% on that Kia. This is how I believe, okay? I do not believe that the government should control everything, but the government is there to help. If I am elected, I'll be more than obliged to bring new ideas. It doesn't mean they're gonna work. And I can tell Ms. Steckman right today that we agreed on quite a lot of things, me and her, even though we come from two different separate parties. So I thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak today. And I hope, we all have good election coming November 3rd. So.
All right. Simon, appreciate you once again joining us. Sharon as well. And good luck to both of you here in the near future here with the election. Thank you once again for agreeing to join us. And that concludes our look into the issues.
Thank you very much.
You bet. That concludes our look into the issues of the candidates from Iowa House District 53, Sharon Steckman and Simon Abela joining us. Copy of this program could also be found at KGLOnews.com, as well as the KGLO News Facebook and Twitter sites. We remind you that on election night, we'll have award-winning wall-to-wall coverage of the 2020 general election here on KGLO, with coverage from CBS Radio News, Radio Iowa, and of course our local election coverage award-winning from the KGLO newsroom, and that coverage starts at 6 o'clock on election night. We thank you once again for joining us for today's candidate program. On behalf of all of us at KGLO, I'm Bob Fisher.